just.
All right. Looks good. Thank you very much, Martin. I would like to call this meeting to order of the Home Rule Charter Commission for January 4th, 2024. Preliminary matters is the first item on the agenda, and I will start the roll call.
I'll handle this one for you. Dalton?
Here.
Mike Foster?
Here.
Clint Folsom?
Here.
Jeff Chu may be joining. He wasn't on a couple minutes ago. I'll check again. Heather Craycraft?
Here.
Claire Dixon?
Here.
Chris Hansen?
Here.
Ryan Hitchler?
Here.
And Ryan Welch?
Here.
All right.
Thank you very much, Martin. The next item under preliminary matters is approval of the agenda. I have a motion for the approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve. Second.
Excellent. So moved by Mike and seconded by Clint. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Unanimous. That's a bad place for that. All right. Then the next item is a follow-up from council on questions from, we're working with some new miking technology. Follow-up from council on questions from the commission, charter referral process.
Thank you. I apologize, I don't know who asked the question, but someone asked what the time frame was for the Board of Trustees to refer the charter once you've submitted it to them. So they have to give notice of the election within 30 days of the submission by the Charter Commission to them. And then they have to set the ballot title, which is a fancy way of deciding what the question is, within 60 days. And those are, just to reiterate, those are shalls. So the Board of Trustees does not have discretion in referring a charter to the public for a vote. So they don't have amendment authority, they don't kick it back to you with ideas or anything like that. They actually just ministerially take those actions. Typically what I've seen is they do it on the first meeting they have after you submit it. They just go ahead and do all of those things at one time, so. Any follow-up questions to that or anything? Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much. And, all right. The next item then is public comment. So individuals are welcome to make public comment. These public comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. So if anyone in the boardroom would like to make public comment. More than welcome to come up. We just ask you state your name and town of residence. Could you have 5 minutes?
Hello, everybody. My name is Celeste Landry, and I live in Boulder, the city of Boulder, but the county of Boulder also, like all of you. And I thought you might like to put my face to my name since I sent you an email. I was very glad at the first meeting that you all talked about representation. That came up when somebody was talking, when Jeff Chu mentioned wards in particular. And I've studied voting methods a long time and elections. And in terms of representation, the best way to get representation is using proportional representation, a proportional voting method, and a multi-winner elections. You may have seen the Washington Post article that talked about various ways to fix democracy. And one of the things that they talked about was instituting proportional representation. Usually when people talk about proportional representation, they're talking about it by political party, which I would call party representation rather than proportional representation. For Superior, you have nonpartisan municipal elections, so you would not have party representation. But you know that in every election, there are certain issues that come up and people are on one side or the other side. And if you don't have proportional representation, a majority or a plurality can, and the issue is important enough, a majority or plurality of the voters can sweep all of the seats. And then you don't have the opposing voices. And it would be nice to have all the voices at the table. Sure, the majority should have a majority of the voice, but it's nice to have all the voices. You have a better government, I think, if you hear from everybody. Colorado has the ability to use proportional voting in elections, and I sent you some of the statutes and Colorado Rule 26 that talks about that. And then last meeting, you also talked about considering charters in Colorado as a possible model charter for you going forward as you write a draft charter. And I had suggested that you look at charters outside of Colorado, not limit yourself just to Colorado. So I suggested you look at 2 other charters, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Portland, Oregon, just sections of those charters, so that you have another option to consider when you're talking about how Superior should set up its government. So I'm happy to answer any questions, further engage with you on this topic, and just to let you know, I'm speaking on behalf of myself only, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comment. Are there any other individuals? Seeing none in the boardroom. Do we have any individuals from Zoom who would like to make public comment? I don't believe so. Mark has stepped out.
He would, I think he would have put, I think he's back in his office.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. We will close public comment for the time being. And we can move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the selection of the guiding charter and establishment of review schedule. So leading up to this meeting, we were offered a number of different charters to review and identify as potentially being the charter that we will use as our guiding charter. Now, I wanted to see what kind of everyone's thoughts were in the review process of this and see if anyone had any strong preferences for any specific charters and any preferences against any specific charters. So,
I've narrowed it down to 2, and they're very similar. That's Eagle and Snowballs. Erie is my favorite.
I also like Erie. I thought there was good language, it was clean. I don't know if I read it correctly, it seems like they force a planning committee. I'm not sure. I think with all this, I think there's bits and pieces that I like and don't like. But overall, I like how that was structured in the language in it. I also liked Castle Pines, and Severance had a great preamble. However, I'm not super strong on these. Like I'm liking them, I'm not loving them. And there's none that I really am specifically against, except for maybe, I think Louisville is just heavy. And I think it's a little too specific on dictating 2 representatives per ward. Whereas others, if we were to go down a districting route, didn't seem to have that constraint where it said there shall be 2. So Louisville is not great for me, but I did like their code of ethics. So that's it.
Well, what I noticed is that Castle Pines and Monument were nearly identical in their structure, as well as Eagle and Severance. So looking at those and then reading Erie seemed to be a bit of a mishmash of those 2 and with some extra elements in there. Narrowing it, to those most recent ones, My favorite is the Eagle/Severance version. It looks to me like it's the tightest, the most efficient. There are, separate articles in different charters that they were able to tuck into existing articles and not alter the meaning. So I liked just having kind of a clean, tight, efficient structure there. But with the option, kind of like Erie did, to kind of put our own spin on it. I do like that Erie has an open space section. So I think that would work well for us as well. And, some other things. In terms of a ethical code, I noticed there is one outlined in the Superior Municipal Code. So that's something that we could maybe draw from. But overall, my top choice is Eagle/Severance.
Thank you. Yeah, so similar comments. My top was Erie, and second was Monument. I felt that, for me, reading down them, I didn't like it when groups were mixed. Like, there were talk of the offices and, let's see what's in my note, like meetings, and then the offices were in one section rather than two. So that was where Eagle took the hit for me, was I didn't like that being mixed together. It's minor, right? I should have said that up ahead of time. Any of these are good, right? All the recent ones I think are very good. The one interesting thing about the Monument / Jamestown that I noticed is it was way more compact, meaning if there were bulleted items, they wrapped them up into paragraphs. And at first I liked it because it was a lot more compact. But what I found when I was trying to compare them side by side is that when it was in a paragraph, it's hard to know a bullet if it's one sentence or two sentence where it ends and where the next item came around. So actually, even though it's shorter, I didn't like it as much. I didn't think the bulleted items were as clear. So those were a few little things I picked out, but Erie was strong number one, and then Monument / Jamestown, or not Jamestown, Castle Pines was second.
So for me, again, I think reviewing the three, I had Eagle as my top choice, Erie as my second, and Monument as my third. So for a lot of similarities to what Claire said specifically, once we get into each article, I think I'll be able to pick others pieces that I liked. But after reviewing all of the language, I would vote for Eagle at this time.
And Chris?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was not one that was perfect. I have lots of notes for and against in every one of these that we read. My least favorite was Snowmass and Louisville. I thought Louisville was just too long, too in-depth. My favorites were in this order: Erie, Castle Pines, and Monument. And I do agree with the comment that was made about bullet points compared to paragraphs, that I much prefer the bullet points. But my favorite would be Erie. His second choice would be Castle Pines, and then Monument.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. Similar comments, I believe, for myself in reading these. My personal favorite was Erie's. That was followed shortly by Severance and Eagle. But it does seem, just kind of tallying at least initial impressions, it does seem that Erie is the one that has overall maybe the most consensus from the individuals involved. I want to see if anyone would be vehemently opposed potentially for Erie moving forward, or if anyone wants to offer a couple more comments.
The only thing I would say about Erie is that it seems to me that they took source material from those previous, the other charters that we all seem to like to different degrees. And I think it makes more sense to do a similar process rather than take Erie as a starting point. Because I think that they took the different things that they liked from those four others that were pretty, close in the last few years, and then took what they liked from those and then added some other things. So to me, it feels like those seem to be more of source material. And I think we could, instead of using Erie then as a source material, go back and kind of do the same process. That it looks to me like what they did.
Okay, great, thank you. And I saw Jeff Chu is online now. So Jeff, I just want to see if you have any thoughts or impressions on the charters, if you have a preference towards any of them and any of them which you vehemently disagree with.
Yeah, no, and that's fine. Thank you. And sorry for being late. I was having some IT issues. I was hoping I was trying to get some Wi-Fi to work. But anyways, so no, I heard about half of other people's comments and appreciate that. I mean, to me, Erie made sense. I think to the point that was just made about Erie using the other ones, it seemed like Erie, Eagle, a lot of them really seem to follow the same boilerplate, if you will. I think the benefit of Erie from that perspective is they've kind of, I'll say, being the latest, they've probably gone through some modernization. I think we had this conversation before of mixing and matching in some ways. And I, whether we start with Eagle or whether we start with Erie, I think we can pull some of the relevant sections that may or may not have been left out or added in as we go along. I don't think there's anything that prohibits us from doing that, regardless of which one we pick to start with.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is important to stress is if there are sections that we, or as individuals, really like from a separate charter from Snowmass or Severance, we can always incorporate that into the charter moving forward. I think, let's say we decided Erie was going to be ours moving forward. We'll obviously create our own. It'll have its own unique voice as well, and we can excise or rework sections from Erie's moving forward too, and incorporate different sections from some of the others as well. So I think it's very much a fluid process when it comes to creating this charter. When it comes to Erie specifically, they definitely relied on a lot of other charters, I think, moving forward. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because we're going to be doing a very similar process, and it is the most recent example too. So I think that could be advantageous to utilize, and then obviously look at some of these other charters, or if there's another charter any of us stumble into in the future and we really like a section, we can always go back and incorporate elements to that moving forward. But I want to see any other additional kind of thoughts, comments.
Yeah, Dalton, if I may, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think every one of these charters that we reviewed, the 8 that we reviewed, there's many of these articles in here that it's, like Jeff said, it's boilerplate. It's exactly the same stuff. So I think starting with, I really like Erie. It's very simple, but we're not going to use all of this stuff in Erie. We're going to change a lot of this stuff because there's stuff even in Louisville that I like better. And then we'll lift it and put it into ours. So it'll be our own, but there'll be a lot of similarities with everybody else's.
I'll just make one more quick push. Purely on structure alone, the Eagle structure makes more sense, not on content of the different things. Just the structure of the articles makes more sense to me. And that's my last push.
And is there anything in particular you'd like to emphasize about the structure between Eagle and Erie?
With the Eagle and Severance, they put all of the personnel together at the front. Town council, I don't remember exactly. Do you have it in front of you? It's on my computer. Town administration and boards and commissions. I liked how that's all addressed in one block. And then, and the other ones seem to hop around a little bit more. So, but I will also concede the last half of the Erie is exactly the same as the Eagle one. So there's a lot of similarities.
I don't know if this is helpful, but Erie did use Eagle and Monument did use a Castle Pines. So that's why you're seeing, yeah. So you're not crazy. That's exactly what happened. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I do actually like that structure approach with Eagle. And even with Erie, if that's the one that I personally like the best, there are definitely elements that I'd like to see changed with it. And I think we're in a great position to be able to make it, for lack of a better word, superior.
Oh, groan.
But any other kind of initial thoughts, questions, comments? Because it does kind of seem overall the consensus might be on Erie with kind of a mind frame that we can adjust and restructure it accordingly for all our needs and demands.
I think as long as we could use the format of Eagle, but the content from Erie and package it like that, I don't have a problem using Erie. I think any of them are good.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely doable. Is that what you have experienced and seen in the past, where maybe one charter has kind of served as a guiding charter, but we have a mind frame of another charter, maybe for some structural options?
Actually, not really, I'll be honest with you. They usually pick a guiding charter, and I do think the commissioners do look outside and come in with ideas that they read, and I think that's fine. And even if you choose to do Erie, but you like Eagle's organization, we can take Erie, switch it around up front, so you're not trying to do that at the back end, and so it's got that structure, and you can see what Erie would look like under Eagle's organization. So we can easily do that.
I'm guessing we can do whatever we want as a commission, so it's much easier or harder.
I know we could like start from the ground up if we absolutely really wanted to, but I don't know if we're gonna go that route. But I do kind of like this approach where we take kind of maybe the best elements from another charter and incorporate it in, using maybe Erie as also the most recent example too, to guide us forward. But kind of with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion to have Erie serve as our guiding charter, with the mind frame that we're probably going to be taking structural elements from Eagle.
Second.
Excellent. All right. Well then, shall we take a vote? Aye. Mike?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Chris Hansen, aye.
Jeff Chu, aye.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we have our guiding charter. Thank you very much. And next on the agenda then is, after the selection, is a review of the first two title chapters of said guiding charter.
Actually, I think we want to talk about that review. Let's talk about the review schedule. So we can get dates and you can feel comfortable about what you're doing tonight, what you're doing in 2 weeks, and that kind of thing. So I have Eagle on the, sorry, I guess I need to go to the eye doctor. I have Eagle on the right and Erie on the left. We will need to transform Erie into an editable document, but we can do that. And so let's see, I was going to try to pull up Eagle so you could see, there we go. So they kind of start off with a little bit of the same topics here, general provisions and elective offices. We have a total of, and this one is standard, the transitional period is a standard one, so that's a small one, but we have a total of 13 articles in Eagle, and it looks like 14, 15, 16 articles in Erie. So some of these are going to be more time consuming for you than others. But typically to a meeting, you have 7 more meetings. So that's 14 articles, not including the 2 you'll do today. And that includes a public hearing date and your last meeting. I don't know when you want to schedule that. So I don't know if you want to take, the first 6 meetings, which gets you through April 14th, and then hold your public hearing on the 18th, and then have your final meeting for cleanup and everything like that on the 2nd of May is what we kind of talked about. So if we're doing that, you're going to have 6 meetings before your public hearing. So you're going to probably want to do at least 3 a night 3 articles a night. So if that kind of works, we can start with that. We can always have extra meetings. We can always move things around. So it's better to put more on the agenda and do less than try to do what's not on the agenda, because that's an open meetings violation and we don't want to go there. So, so I think maybe my suggestion would be 3 articles after tonight, 3 articles a night, and see how that goes, if that works for you all. Okay. And so what I'll do, based upon what I've heard, is I will take Erie's and I will reorganize it as Eagles. And I'll do that pretty quickly so that you have that Word document for the next 2 weeks so you can start looking. You guys know what your next articles are. And then we've talked about this. Based upon what you say tonight regarding the first 2 articles in Erie's, I will also produce a red line for you so you can see what you want to change. And I'll, note any things you might want to talk about maybe at your upcoming meeting, and then you can go over those 2 articles as old business at your next meeting and then tackle your next 3 articles if that works for all of you. Does that sound like a game plan?
Quick question.
Yeah.
I mean, is it all right if we, to your point about open meetings and putting things on the agenda, is it all right if we maybe be aggressive and put an extra agenda item just in case things move real smoothly and we have time within our 2 hours to hit an extra one? This way, if it comes up, we can talk about the next article each week.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. We could plan 4 articles a meeting, so that if you have some that are really short and you're like, nope, lovely, I love this one, no changes, then you can move on. We can absolutely do that.
Yeah, just to avoid the problem of agenda.
Yep, yeah,
Okay,
we can do that, yeah.
Maybe I'm being optimistic. Sorry, guys.
It's a good way to start out.
So I'm going to segue from Jeff's question because I don't mind being prepared like that. Is there ever a time where some of these articles might morph into different? Because there were some of these samples, so to speak, that got really confusing. I think we talked about that a little bit. Is there a point in which it might spill out? Is there a sweet spot on how many articles in each? Okay.
No, I think it really goes to Claire's point about organization and reading it. Because ultimately, right, you're going to put this before the voters. You want them to be able to at least somewhat follow it. And if you mishmash topics like that, they'll feel the same way you felt, like it's jumbled, but if you keep things really clean. So if you want 23 articles.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I just.
Have at it. Okay. We can break it up as much as you'd like.
Awesome. So, thank you.
Sure.
Are there articles that create more contention or debate than others? And can we schedule those out so that we can at least give members of the public the opportunity to come in and weigh in on public comment? For example, I've already been trying to source public discussions from members at large about districting and seeing their opinions, and they're very much different. There's not a single consensus I'm reaching so far. I would like that to be in the public meeting as public comment. So
if you decide to have, and it sounds like you're going to, at least an in-depth discussion about district awards as for representation, that will be probably a very significant discussion. And the other one that I've often seen is issues about powers of council and what powers you want council to have. A lot of times, this was mentioned, open space, real property purchases. Like once the town obtains real property, how is it allowed to get rid of it? Does it have to have some voters for that? I've seen that discussion go on for hours. Ordinances. So right now you're a town, you're a 1 reading. Cities are 2 readings, and often statutory towns go to 2 readings for their ordinances. That's a big topic. The percentage of signatures for recall, initiative, and referendum, and whether you want to adjust that from state law, that's another big one. Qualifications, non-residency qualifications, age, whether someone's a felon, those are often big discussions that come up. So those are some of the big ones I've seen before. And any unique provisions, like an open space or something like that, where you really are creating something that's specific to Superior, those can be lengthy discussions as well. So,
thanks.
Sure.
Any other initial thoughts, comments? Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing if we decide to be aggressive and highlight maybe 4 agenda items, 4 articles or chapters for each of the meetings. Because I do think in reading some of these, it's very clear there are some that are just going to be a bit quicker than some of the others, whereas some will probably have obviously lengthier conversations and discussions about. But if we're able to work through this expeditiously, I mean, I thought we went through the process in selecting a charter pretty quickly as well and identified the structural changes already. I think we can have at it. Yep.
One more thing. Is it advised to go sequentially through the guiding charter? Like, should we take the easier ones first in this meeting, for example, and then try to source the harder ones for public comment?
You can do that. I think it's kind of hard, unless you guys tell me what you think are going to be the areas that are going to, it's hard for me to judge that. I mean, I have my experience I shared with you, but you guys may be like, no, ordinance is fine. We don't care about that, you know? So I think it's hard for me to know that, but if you think you want to do it that way, we can do that. I think one thing that, you know, we talked about with Eagle is you see a lot of organizational stuff up front, and then you see, you know, financing and borrowing. That sometimes is a big topic too. You know, public utilities, not so much, taxation, with Tabor, not so much, but then you get down into referendum and recall. And so you might want to, if you want to group things, I mean, I would definitely have your organizational stuff first. Yeah. That sets the stage, right? And I think that is something that's nice about Eagles is it's all up front. Like this is how the town of Eagle operates. And then we've got all this other stuff. But if the thing is, you know, we make the agendas every time. So if you're like, no, you know what, we want to skip to taxation. We want to just dive in that. We can readjust it, no problem. So if you see something you'd rather focus on that you don't want to wait till the end, and we can keep things like, you know, the miscellaneous provisions or the transition period or stuff like that at the end for simple. I'm sure you noticed that a lot of these have preambles. I believe some have synopsis as well. I think Monuments has a synopsis and a preamble. Those are drafted at the end, and that is your free-for-all time. You guys get to draft that however you would like. So we do take that one at the very, very end. So, because now that once you have the charter in place, you can say to the public, this is what this is. So,
To Ryan's question, would it be helpful for us to maybe take a pulse of topics that we each individually think would be worthy of a more in-depth discussion, just to kind of map out where we think there might be some longer conversations, just to, again, get a high-level pulse of what we think is going to be worthy of conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's more than fair. And Jeff, I think I heard you trying to chime in.
Yeah, just before we touch on that, I mean, I guess with respect to the order in the meetings, so there's a public hearing at the end. You have it now. Does anybody ever in this process sort of publish, all right, we've gone through sections 1 through 3, and then we're willing to take public comment after that in the middle of the process? I know it's not part of the public hearing per se, but at least allowing some access there of what we've done, or is that just opening the door for endless debate? Your experience.
I think the commission's goal is to have public comment at every meeting, you know, right. And I think if we structure it like, you know, whatever you talked about at the previous meeting is provided in red line for the public and for you all, and then the public has the ability to review that in advance, and they can make comment. Well, they can make comment on anything, but they can also say, you know, that red line, I don't like that, that does this or whatever, or yeah. So I think what I heard last meeting was you really want public participation and public comment throughout it, and then you'll have your hearing. Is that?
All right, perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But you're saying though that if we get to the 4th meeting and somebody has public comment for the first time on the first article, and they make a good point, we can change that. We're not stuck to it until the end once we approve it, right?
Right, so my suggestion is that you won't make motions to approve any of the articles you review. You'll just make the final motion at the very end, because you will go back and you might change something that causes a conflict and you have to go back, or like you said, someone will bring something up, or maybe, you'll have some downtime and you'll look at another charter and you'll be like, oh, I like that a lot better, I want to go back to that. So anything can happen.
Okay, just one more comment. If I were doing this on my own, the way I would structure this, my timeline, is I would first decide what order I want the articles to go in, and then I would just go from the top to the bottom, just get them done, instead of jumping around. Just get it done. The first meeting, we've got 3 of them done. The second meeting, we've got 6 or 7 of them done, and so forth. But I would start from the top, put them in the order that we want initially, and then go and work on them.
I think that's more than reasonable. And I definitely think that's kind of the process that we'd like to see moving forward. Just go through the charter process, identify all the different articles that we're going to be tackling. I definitely think it's, to Mike's point, worth kind of just getting a pulse on what individuals really think. I really want to have substantial debate on this article, looking at either Eagle or Erie. So, Micah, do you want to see any sort of thoughts on a specific article or section for you?
And for me, it's not necessarily debate, it's an understanding of the decision that we're ultimately making and what impact that may or may not have on the town. So if, for example, finance is a common theme, I don't know if there's any work that staff would need to do ahead of time to provide information to us that could help us have a more informed conversation at the next meeting, so that we could make an informed decision on the finance topic. So I just want to, that's kind of where I'm going with that, is if there are questions that staff may need to prep ahead of time so that we can have that informed conversation, I think would be helpful to know.
Any other kind of initial thoughts in this area?
I somewhat think we just need to get into it and see how it goes and adjust instead of worrying about it too much ahead of time.
More than understandable too. All right. Well, I think we have kind of a good idea of the structure moving forward and the number of articles that we kind of want to tackle at each of the meetings. I think if we're able to go through a significant number of articles at a particular meeting, that's great. And if there's obviously some that just require a bit more time to discuss or highlight or get some answers for, that's also excellent as well. And the good thing is too, we can always go back and kind of adjust and reassess things accordingly. If we do get some, let's say, outstanding public comment, or anything that we want to potentially revisit at a certain point. It's not final until it's final.
That's right.
With that all detailed, are we able to move forward to the review of the first 2 titles chapters of the guiding charter?
We're good to go. We have an editable document already, thanks to Martin.
Wow. See, we are
a lot of good resources.
we are on top of things. That is fantastic. All right. Well, Article 1, we see general provisions moving forward. Very first section, name and boundaries. Definitely don't think we want to have Weld County there, that's for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
No, I think those are easy changes in all of the charters that I reviewed too. The name and boundaries section was not one that I thought required too many changes besides just updating it accordingly for Superior.
So is there technically a corner of Superior that's still in Jefferson County?
Yes, there is.
There is.
Yep. So we are Boulder
I
and...
apologize.
Yeah, Boulder and Jefferson.
And as the town continues to grow, is there a threshold at which we would officially become a city because of the population, or is the city versus town a more arbitrary designation?
So historically, it's based upon population, but when you become home rule, if you want to become the city of Superior, you can. Changes a lot of, it's an expensive change, I think Martin will tell you.
I already got feedback from community members. They want to remain town.
Yeah.
I think, any other thoughts?
I would agree with that. I think
Yeah.
we're known as the town of Superior. No need to change what's working. I did have a question about 1.02, where it says an elected town council. Is this the place where we could perhaps change the designation from Board of Trustees to City Council or Town Council?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So yes, you can remain Board of Trustees, but I will say it is very common. It's almost an indicator that a town has gone home rule to be a town council. So it's quite a common phrase now.
Yeah, my own view is yes. I think that would be a good change as part of this process to call it the Town Council. And now we have council members, and it just seems to be a more recognizable, both for going home rule, but also just kind of in the general domain of, I've had people over the years go, what is a trustee? What is that? Yeah.
You could be a Board of Aldermen if you.
Let's do that.
Then you'll really get that question.
Are there any other implications to making that change in the name other than just what it's called?
No, it's what it's called. I mean, obviously, it will change probably some practical things at town hall. Council members will have all new name things and just that shift, but they're small. Yeah.
And I think just kind of gauging, we're all fine staying town of Superior as opposed to city. Yeah.
And general consensus on the town council too? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And as far as one of the key clarifications, if we're jumping ahead to 1.02, council manager, just wanted to see, is everyone all right with continuing that approach as far as government structure goes?
I mean, almost everyone, I didn't see any difference,
Yeah.
and the differences are major, right? Where a mayor can veto other council, this is working. I don't know why we would
Yeah.
make such a drastic change.
I did have a question about that. I saw Snowmass, I think, was council manager mayor. Is that right? There were 3 designations?
There may have been, I'm not familiar with snow masses, but yeah. That's unusual. That is particularly unusual. I'm not sure what, I'd have
I
to
don't know
look
what
more
the deal was
carefully.
either, but
Yeah.
I wonder if you have any insight on that.
Okay, anything else on either 1.01 or 1.02?
I don't know that we need to list in 1.02 some of the duties and powers of the town council right there, do we? Which shall enact local legislation, adopt budgets, determine. That's all going to be listed in a subsequent article, won't it?
Yes, it will. That's true. You could shorten that and you could say, all powers shall be vested in the elected town council pursuant to this charter and state law, okay.
That'd be good.
If I can type.
All in favor of brevity?
Yeah, and spelled properly. It's very sticky. Okay.
All right.
Don't.
And then,
Actually, you know what? I'm gonna suggest applicable spelled properly.
I am curious, it's a nuanced point, but when you put it up in the top section like that, Claire, doesn't that give the reader a sense of what powers they have without having to read the entire document?
But it's not going to be comprehensive.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't give a good sense of what the powers actually are. It feels unnecessary.
And the way I would read this is the form of government is just the structure, and then the authority is kind of what comes next of what they're able to do. So it keeps the form of government pretty simplistic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Heather, did you have a point?
In 1.01, it should be Town of Superior, correct?
Yeah, I just made a note to change
Oh,
all
thank you.
reference.
Sorry.
Sorry, you can't see that. Yeah,
No,
I wasn't
and
gonna.
I was, okay.
Otherwise, I'd be typing for
Yeah.
a while, but yeah.
All right. Anything else? These two first ones?
All right.
If I remember this,
Profanity.
yeah, this was pretty much the same as almost all of them. I think there were some that maybe only had 2 of those sentences there, but I don't think there's a lot of difference.
Any other comments, thoughts? All right. I think we can move on. Rights and liabilities. Obviously, we'll update Town of Erie to Town of Superior.
I do think there were some limitations in one of them, as Catherine had mentioned, about limitations on disposing of property.
Yeah, so some communities, and it really is community specific. So, and this is just a little background that you may or may not know. There's certain limitations on certain property under state laws, particularly for statutory municipalities, where if property has been held for a park purpose, it has to go to a vote before it's disposed of. Certain leases over a year have to go to the voters to be approved. That lease one is a giant. I'll be frank, it's a giant pain because the entity's not really disposing of it. It's still the entity's property, but to have to go to a vote is it's costly. But a lot of communities have park open space restrictions. I actually have a client that has the opposite. They can't take park property without a vote because they have a recreational district and they don't want to be taking that property because they don't want to manage that. They have another entity that does that. So they have the opposite, but you will see a lot of like the disposal of open space or park space, or I think, I know there's a city in Colorado, it has an older charter that has like any property that's been dedicated for any use to the city has to be disposed of through a vote. That's really restrictive. So that, a lot of open space park restrictions. And Superior may have another area of property that it wants to make sure the voters approve any disposing of.
Oh, so do you, if I may, so do you know offhand, so obviously a lot of our open space is bought under a vote for the open space tax. And do you know if that had limitations in it in terms of disposal?
I don't, but we could, Martin's shaking his head, he doesn't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I've stared at that ballot language a lot, so I don't think so. But we should look. But also, a lot of times open space is then given an easement to Boulder County. So it wouldn't even be, at that point, I don't even think Superior by itself could sell that if Boulder County owns the easement. I don't know for sure.
The person would take subject to Boulder County's easement, which wouldn't make the property probably, unless they wanted to do something with the open space that was open space oriented, it wouldn't make it valuable to them. They couldn't develop it, so.
I guess, yeah, just in asking, it just seems as if though, if the property was bought under the guise of the open space ballot language, that disposing of it would also kind of fall under voter approval as well, if you will, right? So like if we wanted to, if some board later on wanted to, expand the airport over the Coyote Ridge, then, there would be some limitations since it was purchased with those funds.
Well, it's also zoned open space natural at that point, right? So it's a lot more of an in-depth process than just selling it.
Well, I think that's the fundamental question. I mean, obviously, if it's zoned and a board is willing to sell it, they're also willing to change the zoning. So that's zoning is not a saving grace if a board is willing to make changes along those lines. So the question is whether we want to protect ourselves long-term on that or not.
And I'll just ask a question because I don't know. Is there a reason why Boulder County gets an easement over it? Is there a program between the entities for open space?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact reason.
Well, just to chime in a little bit, so maybe what you're thinking of, Ryan, is like the Listoka open space where the town purchased it and then the Boulder County Commissioners approved a conservation easement over that. And then we've done the reverse on a couple of other properties. So there are some properties that the town owns fee simple and some that the county owns fee simple, and then we negotiate a conservation easement to help reduce the purchase price of the property and then jointly manage it. So it's been a little
Funding issue.
Okay. That's helpful.
So is the real question in this section whether we want real property, the disposition of real property to go to the voters or keep that at the town council level? Is that the?
I think,
Or does that belong in the open space section if we're having open space section? If that's the concern. You know, obviously if the town wants to sell the town hall property and move into a new property, then yeah, there probably is no valid reason that it needs to go towards the voters. But when open space, which is purchased with open space funds under the guise of the open space ballot language and should have got passed, 20 years ago, that's kind of a different story in my mind anyways.
I would agree with that. I think that you do not want to put restrictions on the sale of kind of non-open space properties because there's definitely, I mean, I was involved in the sale of a couple of properties, smaller properties, but they were somewhat time sensitive and just something that you would not want to have kind of have tied up by voter approval for. But I think having open space be protected, I can't imagine the scenario where a board would decide to start selling open space, but I think to have it protected the way it was to acquire it, I think probably makes sense.
One possible middle ground, some communities require the disposition of property or open space to be approved by ordinance. So talking about that ordinance process, you have ordinance and a public hearing. So it's not just a resolution on an agenda somewhere that approves a purchase agreement that no one notices. There's actually at least the public process. So if people don't want it, they can come and voice their concerns about it. So that's a kind of middle ground option if you don't want to have the vote.
I'm confused. Are we saying that there already are some protections on open space because of the way it's purchased, or yes or no?
I think what Martin said was no, or whoever looked at the language said no in the ballot language originally.
Sorry.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Martin. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was talking to.
Oh, that's okay.
What was
My question was, are there already some protections or limitations on the disposal of open space because of the funds that open space is purchased with, yes or no?
Well, I guess it's an item I think that our attorneys have shared with the board in the past, I think, and also in public meetings, that if a property was purchased by the open space fund, if the open space was ever to become something else, the open space fund would have to be made whole by the general fund or someplace else. The open space fund couldn't bear the burden of paying for something that ultimately became a general fund asset. So
if they
it would have to be paid back.
It would go back into the open space fund, whatever they.
Yes, the open space fund would have to be made whole, either through an asset or payment for that asset.
Yeah, but anymore there's just no open space left to buy in Superior. So going back to the fund doesn't really buy the town anything at this point. I mean, there's
exactly
3 or 4 properties left. So while that may sound good, it doesn't really buy us much.
Right.
I mean,
But doesn't that allow for upkeep and maintenance of open space and trails and all that?
oh yeah, it's actually pretty vaguely written. And I remember talking to some people that actually got it through, were surprised that they got it through with that vague a language. So yes, it can be used for maintenance. It can be used for other things. The town's used it to build trails, right, that connect open space and like river flood mitigation and that kind of stuff, all loosely open space related. It's been used.
Yeah.
But it was all within the original ballot language.
We were very lucky getting that through, and there's no sunset clause either on it, which was amazing. So, well, I guess I would. I don't know how we want to resolve this. I would think there needs to be some some caveat within here about open space, whether it's applied up front in terms of disposal open space or in the open space management section. I think there's some other concerns on open space I want to bring up later. I apologize. I have a helicopter going overhead. So,
Yeah, I definitely think, I mean, open space is important, I think, to every single one of us up here. I definitely think we want to have at least a section focused on that, and I'm wondering if the disposal of open space maybe doesn't necessarily need to be as explicit in this specific section, but we could dive into a bit more details with it in the open space section.
Well, and Erie's does that in their charter. My concern about it, you got to be really careful there to not put more restrictions than the ballot measure.
Yeah.
So we need to look at that closely when we get there, I think.
well, to be fair, we can have the discussion when we get there. I mean, more restrictions is a relative term, rather, whether more restrictions from a written perspective or the intent of what the ballot language, what everyone who purchases open space is open. Like you said, like someone said, throwing money back into the open space fund, but developing, Coyote Ridge really doesn't help the intent of why they passed the open space to get the funding in the first place.
So what we can do is I can just make a note that we may come back and add language that says, the right to purchase, lease, receive, hold, and enjoy or sell or dispose of real or personal property except as limited by this charter here. And then you can have your open space section. So I'll just make a note that we might
Perfect.
and add that language in there. And when we get to an open space, you can have that in-depth discussion about how you want to handle that.
Just one note, Eagles adds several sub-bullets around this exact numbered item, so good reference if we want to go look at that.
Yeah, that whole number 7 is it's actually pretty good because it does have some caveats in here about half acres or less. They don't need to go to voters, but anything more in open space and parks, it does. So I do think that Eagles number 7 is pretty good.
With the subsections, the A, B, and C.
Yeah, detailing disposal, what that means.
Yes, yeah.
How would everyone's kind of initial thought process be if we incorporated kind of these subsections from Eagle into here?
Yeah, and it looks like that does say it's by ordinance, not by vote.
Yeah, so what that basically says is that the town council can decide what's going to be the procedure for the disposition.
So this feels like we're mixing and matching the mechanism for doing something versus this is what the government has the rights to do, authority to do, right?
Yeah, a little bit. It's covering both.
Okay.
Sorry. Eagle has apparently encountered some problems with what disposal means.
I was wondering, I was thinking a couple of the other charters, I don't know if it's necessary for ours, but a couple do have definition sections. And I find keywords. Do we want to be explicit in what disposal means in this definition here, or kind of intentionally keep it vague?
I think those definition sections to me seemed like just too many words. I understand the intention there, but it felt like it was a whole page of this is what this word means, this is what this word means. So I'd rather capture it more concise when needed rather than an additional article or whatever you would call it for definitions.
You mean more explicit when needed?
Correct.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
Just on the number 7 from Eagle, though, the very first paragraph goes into a little bit more depth, and it's pretty clear
Yes, you're right, Chris.
that the board is allowed to sell, dispose of real property and personal property, provided, however, that disposal of land designated as a park and open space. So I like the whole section 7A, B, and C. And is that too much to ask to put that in there?
Does that mean that anything over a half acre has to go to a vote? Is that what that's saying?
Anything over a half acre, even if designated, oh, wait, hold on, disposal. Even if designated as a park or open space shall not require a vote. No, it's saying that anything over half acre, hold on. Park or open space shall not require voter approval, provided that the council makes express finding. So, I don't know.
Sorry, Chris.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I mean, I read 7C, and I don't have it sitting in front of me just when it was flashed up there. I read 7C saying that you could dispose of parks and rec by ordinance, but maybe I misreading it. So I don't know if you can flash that back up again.
For 7C.
It was on the ordinance. Yeah, see, town may by ordinance further regulate and protect the designation, conveyance, and disposition of town land in use as parks or open space. So to me, that says they can get rid of it by ordinance, which I don't think I think, at least I'm saying, I don't want us to be able to go do that for open space.
Yes, I agree with that. But B though is saying that
Yeah.
anything under half acre can be sold, even if it's a park, going to the voters. So, and I think that's fine.
So I think, okay, and this is mixing and matching. Do we want to be designating those things in the open space, parks and open space section, or we're doing part of it here, then we're going to go back in the open space? So again, this is just sort of how many of the details are we putting here versus saying per the first recommendation, if we say they can dispose of property pursuant to the terms of this charter.
So
I'm okay adding it here or there, but I disagree with 7C, but I'm okay adding it here or there, but putting it in both places seems more confusing.
yeah, I wouldn't recommend this exact language the way it's written. The C kind of contradicts the language up above, stating that it's required for prior approval by the electors is required, and then it seems to indicate that the town can regulate the disposition of town land in use as parks or open space. That's I don't know. That to me is very difficult to decipher, especially with the definition of disposal being in there. So it's not. I wouldn't quite copy that verbatim, I guess is my suggestion. I'm not sure what C is intending on the disposition section and the conveyance section.
Maybe disposition means something else in that,
Do we
in
want
that
to have
paragraph. I don't know. It'd be weird, but you know,
would it be worth
it's odd.
having a,
That's not the rules of statutory construction. It's going to mean the same.
Okay,
Yeah.
well.
So that's problematic, I think.
would it be worth spending a few minutes talking about whether we would want open space to be disposed via ordinance or vote of the town council or through vote?
I'm wondering
of the public, because that seems to be the sticking point that we're wrestling with.
I would
I'm
say,
almost wondering if we should maybe focus on an open space specific discussion, maybe at a later date when that ordinance or that section actually comes up. I think that's definitely going to be something that's highlighted and we have a lot of discussions on. As far as like the specific rights and liabilities here, personally, I lean a bit more in favor of keeping it a bit more simplistic in here. And then if we want to add more details, specify specifically on open space and the disposal of such and the mechanisms and process with that, we detail that a little bit further down.
And you could just put a note here that says there's special considerations for designated open space as outlined in section whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the first catch-all phrase or the first catchphrase that she proposed was pursuant to the terms of the charter, right? And that occurs later on. If you want to reference the specific open space, that's fine.
Either one works, I think. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So
we're going
we're
to
back
keep
to
moving
a-
on, have open space conversation.
So we're back to short.
Thanks.
Yeah, I did.
Right.
I'm kind of making notes to myself
Yeah,
to keep track of, like, there was a discussion about Eagles language, so
I think that
just
makes,
bear with me a little bit.
I think that makes sense, kind of in the spirit of having a clean reading thing. Eagles to kind of, you're going, one line, and then you kind of jump to this, okay, let's throw a bunch of open space in there. It's not as clean, so organizationally, I think it makes sense to have it later. Okay, but good conversation.
Okay, no, very good conversation, and I'm excited when we really dive into open space. That's going to be excellent. But I guess kind of jumping ahead, any of the other points here, 8, 9, 10, 11, that...
Can you scroll up just a little bit?
Absolutely. Tell me where you'd like
So
to.
3 and 7 are slightly different, right? Or is it more just the delinquent on tax that 3?
Yeah, and special
enables?
assessments, yeah. Yeah, that's a special power, a specific
Okay.
power that municipalities have, so.
Because about half of them, it seemed, don't have, I forget which one of these clauses, but they only have 10. A lot of them
I
have
bet
10
some of
versus
them
11.
don't have 3.
Okay, yeah, I think
but
that's what I saw.
I gotta be honest, I'd keep 3, if I were you. It's a good, doesn't come up all that often, but it's nice to have a charter provision you can look to say, yep, no, we can do this, so.
What does that mean? What, like, someone's home, if they were delinquent on their taxes, the town could purchase it? Is that what that means, or, wow, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Possession.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often. The special assessments happens more often. So let's say the town decides to improve a road and they're gonna impose special assessments. Everybody on the road pays their linear feet, whatever, and the town comes up with a calculation, and someone doesn't pay. They could acquire or purchase that property for the failure to pay those assessments, because those are eventually, they go through the county and they're collected as taxes. So the town could acquire that property through that mechanism, so, and then dispose of it like they could in whatever you decide 7 says, so.
I'm also, I don't mind that clause or 3, but I'm also keenly aware of individuals reading that, and one clause in the general election could shut down the entire home rule. And so I'm wondering, is this a clause that sticks in people's craw when they
I have
first read
never
it?
seen it happen, but I cannot guarantee that it won't. People are unique. And so,
I guess as the term eminent domain would probably cause more angst amongst people, but yeah.
But when you're talking delinquent taxes, I mean, there's already a process that members of the public can buy delinquent
yeah.
things at delinquent
Yeah, this-
tax sales. So it's just saying the town could buy it. It's not, I don't think it's implying that they have to buy it or they will buy everything.
And it doesn't necessarily put them in a position that's different than the public's right to buy like a piece of property with delinquent taxes. It just gives them the right to be one of those bidders if it wants.
Players.
Yep.
Okay.
And I have to say, it's nice to have it in there, but it's a pretty rare exercise. Yeah.
Right.
So.
Any other thoughts, comments on any of these other items and rights and liabilities?
I hear what Ryan's saying, but in the spirit of providing maximum flexibility to future town councils, I'm
100%.
Yeah.
I'm a little recency bias on some recent developments in the town.
Yeah.
Members could read something like that and then throw a fit. Even though the intent was not that.
And hopefully, prior to any public purchase, that there would be an ordinance or some city council discussion on acquiring that property, which would provide an opportunity for the public to weigh in and voice their opinions on that matter.
Any other thoughts, comments? All right.
You're through Article 1. Congratulations.
Actually, can I just look at 11? Because I didn't see you scrolling down far enough on 11. I apologize. Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's that catch-all. Okay. Move on.
Okay. Now you're done with Article 1.
All right. I'm down. Okay, Article 2. This is a bit lengthier. Town council and mayor. Very first one. I think one of the items here, do we want to continue to have mayor and 6 council members. What are individuals' thoughts there?
I've heard some feedback of people wanting more council members. I'm not sure if I agree or not, but I'm just voicing that's. Is that getting any better?
Maybe,
Other kind of,
maybe someone who's been on the board could weigh in on that.
Yeah.
yeah,
7's good.
That's fine.
I think seven's good. I agree.
yeah. I think 7's a great number.
7 is good.
Well, and from reading statutory, towns are 6, right? I guess if they're smaller, you can get a disposition to be 4, but doesn't look like there's any, even for a statutory town to have more. So I don't know why we would rock the boat on this one.
I agree.
For what it's worth, I do have a client, a home rule client, that has 8, but a non-voting mayor. And that mayor is always angry because they have so I'm not suggesting that. Just, it's a bit of an unusual arrangement.
So a small nuance, and I don't remember where this one fell versus the other ones. I thought saw some definitions that said the collective was referred to as the town council, including the mayor, and this seems to say it's a town council plus a mayor, and there's council members. I'm sure there was definitions, and maybe this one defined it differently, but I thought the town council generically was the council members, including the mayor,
That is generically, yes.
as opposed to this says town council and mayor, and says a mayor and the 6 council members, which would okay, it's.
Yeah, I don't know if you need that second sentence particularly.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
That's a try to solve.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that people realize the town council includes the mayor, so the mayor is a council member effectively, as opposed to a mayor plus, I don't know. However it works, that's fine. It seemed a little confusing.
Yeah.
7 elected officials.
Yes, period.
Do you want to keep that second sentence in there?
Well, but it's defining the terms later in the charter, right? So I feel like helps clear up later items.
Okay, that's fine. All right, so this is kind of your big discussion.
Yeah. So what are kind of individuals' thoughts? Jeff, I'm sorry if I just cut you off, just kind of on the creation of districts and electing maybe a specific number of members from said districts.
And we do have that map as well. I think you had in your packet, if that's helpful.
That was in here?
No, it was email.
Oh,
Yeah.
I missed it.
Jeff, would you?
And before we get into this, I know we've had public comment on the perpetual proportional representation. Is this where we would have that conversation if we were going to have it?
I was wondering actually with kind of the point about proportional voting mechanisms, is it better to specifically detail that here? Or would it be better to almost not include it in the charter to allow for that potentially in the future to be decided on by the council itself? Because obviously if we make it explicit here, that kind of adds some rigidity to it, locks it in. But if we don't include it, it gives the flexibility in the future to potentially address that.
That's what you're charged with deciding.
There is an election section. That seems more appropriate in the election section than this section.
That's
I
fine.
agree.
I didn't do my homework on proportional voting. Is there a definition, or should we talk about later?
We can
Oh my gosh.
I would be in favor of talking more in depth on proportional
Later.
voting in the voting system in that specific section. But as far as like wards and districts go.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't feel prepared to make a decision tonight on
Yeah.
proportional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
But Jeff, would you like to add some details here? You had done a bit of work on some of the past elected officials and divided it into specific areas of Superior.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason this came to my mind, I know other people wanted to look at this, but the reason this came to my mind was it felt just, living here 25 years and seeing different people coming to run for the board, that sometimes there could be hot button issues in any region, and then a lot of people would try to run on the board that way, and sometimes, and no offense to anyone who ever runs for a backyard issue, that's why a lot of people often run, is because of a backyard issue. But the danger in that is that the board could get loaded up with a very, very non-town-wide issue and create potentially some problems for everyone else. And I know we all swear our oath to represent the town as a whole, but things being things, it can change it. So, my concern was, can we guarantee more geographical representation to take away potentially stronger NIMBY bias, right? Or from that perspective. So that was my impetus for trying to say, hey, how do we do this? How do we look at it? All we did here was I just went back and took what Martin sent me in terms of who was running for all the different board seats in each of the different years, and just made a really gross cut of, hey, we have kind of north of Rock Creek, we have south of Colton, and we have the first part of Rock Creek, and then just looked at the number of people running in each different area and each different year. And you can see the people running kind of moves back and forth at different times quite a bit.
It actually seems pretty evenly spread.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually,
Yeah,
nothing
thank
really
you.
sticks out there to me.
Well, I mean, sometimes you have 4 people in one and 1 in the other, and other times like I think in 2016 you had the number of people,
Sure.
8 people running from one area and only 2 people running from the other, which brings the problem of, can you get enough candidates running from each
But you
district,
can't put
if you will?
causality as to a specific issue. Is that what caused someone from a certain area to run? They might have just been the people that were passionate about running for the board, right? Your
I'm
concern
not saying
is,
this. I'm sorry.
well, I guess, did you see this? I mean, have people seen this issue on our boards that we've had this kind of problem? I mean, are we chasing a problem we haven't seen before? Is the question.
Well, I think the question is, are we chasing a problem or are we trying to prevent a problem? From my in my mind, the town has grown such that well, I'll let other people say what they think in terms of that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm actually divided on this issue. I've talked to several people about this, and I get the sentiment, like I said before, that's kind of split in half. And here's a case example for districts, which would be, let's say in 2024, 26, you get 6 or 7 members from downtown on the board, and no representatives from South Rock Creek, and the airport noise continues to be an issue. And there's no representatives that feel that problem. I used to live in South Rock Creek and heard that airport noise every day and can completely resonate, empathize with it. When I moved to downtown, I frankly don't hear it. And I'm not it doesn't make me not empathetic to South Rock Creek, but day to day, I just don't hear the noise. Now I understand the board, the council would hear complaints and have to address that. But I'm just saying, would the council really feel that urge of not having someone represented on there? Or vice versa? Now, on the other hand, I think the sentiment is, we're a small town. Creating these divisions could make the town feel more divided and split up. And I hear that argument pretty well and understand it. But at the same time, like, how is there a middle ground somewhere where if it does get overweighted in one section or another, that those voices can be heard? That's kind of what I've heard so far and have thought about it. So it's a tricky issue. I wish we had scheduled this so we could get public comment in here, but that's probably a far cry anyway.
Well,
If I can, just Jeff, really quick. So one thing to keep in mind, I gave you that memo as to like kind of constitutional and statutory issues with regards to districting. And I don't know what the population breakup of these 3 areas is, or if it will satisfy that. And that's going to be your biggest hurdle. And I think if you want to continue having that discussion, that's probably the next step to figure out whether or not we can draw these lines for the population issues, because I think what you probably created, my guess is communities of interest. And that's good. So we need to keep that in mind as well. The other thing, and I don't know if this is possible here, but Monument did this. I have another home rule client who has this. It's Canyon City. They're quite a bit bigger, but Monument did a mix of at-large council members and district members. So you did have some at-large council members who represented the entire town, and those were their constituents. So there's also that possibility as well. If you want to divide it maybe into, maybe you just get one from each district, and then you have 3 at-large or something like that, or some mix, or 2 districts or whatever. I don't know. So that's something to think about as well, to get that kind of mix in there so that, maybe a broader voice is heard. I don't know. So just a thought.
Yeah, I think if we do overlay population onto, 2 or 3 districts, it's going to look a whole lot different than this. And yeah, I guess my biggest concern with the district concept is that you might have a time period where there's very few people willing to run, and you just, and our neighbor city had this issue where, someone got elected and they were the only one running, and then they got recalled, and it just really kind of, I think, did the whole city a disservice perhaps for, having to go through that, versus the best people, people signing up to run and getting the top people that are in the election and have them serve. To your question earlier, Ryan, I don't recall, the board being loaded at any one particular time with people trying to go, one direction or the other. People are inspired to run for all kinds of different reasons at different times in their lives, and but yeah, I never really felt like that it was kind of stacked. And I know some communities do have that. They definitely have blocks of people kind of running to do this or that. But I've not experienced that here. Not to say it couldn't happen in the future, but.
And I did add these up, and they're pretty evenly distributed. 22%, since 2008, 22% of the candidates have come from the northern third, 42% from the middle third, and 37% from the bottom third. So, it's pretty even.
Yeah, but the hard part of that is the population has shifted in over these years, right? Because South of Colton wasn't even developed, and then certainly the downtown area wasn't developed. So,
right, a chunk of those, that 22% for downtown, came last year. So, as downtown continues to grow, I would imagine we're going to have more candidates. So again, I think we're probably pretty evenly distributed. And I would be fine keeping it as we have it now. At large. Yeah, at large.
My inclination is to keep it as is for the reasons people have mentioned. I think it might create more problems than it would solve, really. It might create more type of divisions, and the town is of the size that anyone who runs really should be able to represent the entire town. I don't think that's too much to ask or too hard for anybody, so.
And I'll just say, following, the board as much as I have, I've never seen that behavior where people aren't representing the whole town, right? They're having open houses and different events in different parts of town where it's like First Fridays or, the Thursday night evening social, right? Different parts of town. I don't know. Past history, I haven't seen this cause any problem. But I have heard of other towns having issues, and there were watching some elections. If there had been, there are certain candidates that would there was potentially someone running from certain regions that may not have been good on the board, but if they were the only ones running, right? I just think it has unintended consequences that won't do us any favors.
Yeah, I think just geographically anticipating if Superior is completely built out, what's the sheer number of people that we realistically could even see living in Superior? I don't know if dividing it would necessarily solve issues. And one of the things that I constantly go back to is I think we all have some ideas on what these bounds would relatively be, but every 10 years, just based on like the population, those bounds would have to change just to accommodate, let's say, downtown Superior building up. If there's any sort of other future development projects in a different area, let's say Superior Marketplace, potentially add some apartments, the boundaries will obviously have to change every 10 years. And I think, yes, there is a possibility that we have overrepresentation in a specific part. I mean, in the past, I think it's fair to say we've had overrepresentation from Rock Creek, but now as downtown Superior has just naturally kind of built up, you've kind of naturally gotten some more people to step up to the plate, and I'm sure the same will continue to happen in the future. And I've thought if we had a board that was really focused on a specific area, we always have an election in 2 years. I'm sure someone else in that specific area would want to run.
Or you have recall. Also, right? I mean, there's always that option. Not a good option, but there's always that option.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would agree with what it sounds like most of you are saying. And with Claire, I agree with you on that every board member should be representative of the entire town. We're not a big town, and I don't think there's any reason to go to wards. Every board member that I've worked with and I've been involved with the town is that they've all rallied around issues that happened in any part of the town. The example that was made was the airport noise, and I mean, who's leading the charge on that? And you got a board member that lives in the new development in downtown Superior. So I think, that's a good example that he's representative of the entire town. He has concern for the entire town. So I don't know. I think we're too small for it, and I like it the way it is. And I don't think you're going to see much change if you do change it.
If I may, yeah. So I'm not trying to push for the districts per se at all. I mean, I think it was a conversation I've seen in a lot of the other towns having multiple districts and things like that. So bringing it up is something to have this conversation. I'll say I have seen in my time on the board some territorial things that may not have suited the town in the best interest overall, and I think most board members most of the time do certainly represent the town as a whole. I think between the recall method and other things, yeah, we can address it that way and solve those problems if they do come up. But I have seen things, I don't want to point any specific issues out per se, but I've seen that, and I've also seen groups running to represent certain areas for certain issues. I'll call them one-issue candidates. It's happened in the past. But it sounds like that's not a desire for the board to go forward on, or for this commission to move forward on it. And I'm fine with that as well, because like I said at the beginning and bringing it up was, hey, bring it up, have the conversation, then we can talk about it if people ask why we didn't do that when Louisville and Erie and everyone else has moved to districts. So we can move on that. Keep it as is.
It does seem, I'd say for this point, that the leaning is that we have the mayor and the council members all just be at large. All right. The next point.
Dalton, before we take that next point, I want to make sure the language that we use throughout, I would really like us to use as much gender neutral language as possible, because I have seen in some charters where it describes the city manager as a male, and we may not have a male city manager in the future, so I want to make sure that we're using as much gender neutral language as we can.
Is your preference like gender silent? So it's really just the person's title as opposed to any kind of, okay. Yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah. And I haven't encountered any of that so far. Yeah.
So question if I may, on the two-term limit. So I know this came up when Elia was on the board. So at a constitutional two-term limit side, so how does that work with respect to this 10 years versus, I mean, technically here, the way that some of this is written, someone could be appointed, a month into the term and effectively serve 11 years and 11 years and 11 months. Is that how it is under today's the state level two-term limitation, or is there a different limit?
For me,
does that make sense?
Yeah, for municipalities, I think it's a little unclear. My recollection is whether the individual, I have to look to check to see if the individual appointed, if that counts towards the term. I don't think it does. I think this represents what state law says, that last sentence in section 4. So someone could serve for 2 consecutive terms, so that's 8 years, and you're right, like they could serve almost a 2-year term. If, for some reason there was a vacancy and appointed, they could almost be on for 10 years.
Or 12 years, really.
Or they could switch offices as well. So you're a council member for 2 consecutive terms, and then you run for mayor for 2 consecutive terms. So you're on there for quite a bit of time. So this can be flexed any way you would like. So. And just to go back to number 3, I didn't hear anybody pipe up or anything like that you're fine with the 4-year terms. The staggering, that's pretty, that's the way staggering works when it gets out of whack. Some communities have 2 years terms for their mayors. So their mayors flip over more frequently. I don't know that there's any advantage to that or not. But I just wanted to mention that that's a possibility if you want your mayor to flip over more often or run for election more often, I guess I'd say.
I personally think having some consistency at the top of the organization is beneficial for the organization, and every jurisdiction I've lived in has sort of somebody runs for city council and then they run for mayor, and that just seems to be how a lot of jurisdictions, and I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
At the end of the day, you're still going to the voters, and the voters get to decide who is their mayor.
Okay, I just wanted to raise it as a possibility, so.
So my proposal would be in section 4 to kind of limit, even if someone gets appointed, that they serve, no more than 2 terms or 10 years. So it'd be sort of a half term, because you can certainly, I think of that.
I remember hearing some language, and I may be wrong, but if you're appointed, that you have to be on the ballot at the next
That's correct.
time, so you couldn't actually get to 12.
No, you
Then
never
10 would be max.
Oh, I thought it said for the purpose of this limitation, any term which an individual is appointed. So was there somewhere else that said that they would have to, because if you got appointed to someone's 4-year term, then is there language that says you have to there? I missed that.
It may be down
I saw
in vacancy. Let's see.
Yeah, there's language and definitely in some of the other charters.
Yeah, I don't know if it was in this one.
Yeah.
Vacancy in the office of council member. Okay, that's a bit more unusual, but as defined below, sorry, I'll keep, this actually dictates who the appointed person is.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Number 2.
There we go, okay. Yeah, so let's say someone was elected and they passed away right away. And let's say you didn't have all this language and town council could just appoint someone. They would only serve up until the next election, which would be 2 years from that previous election that person was just elected at. And then if we go back up to that language that, let's say it's an 18-month term, they'd serve a year and a half after being appointed, then they could run for 2 more terms after that, so, yeah.
Okay, no, that clause covers what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Sorry. I went too far.
Any other kind of thoughts or comments on points 3 or 4?
Yeah, I have just questions on, and this is pretty common language in all the charters.
Remove it.
But so I just want to be clear, because it's not, to me, it's not real clear in here. You can serve, so there's term limits. You can serve 2 consecutive terms and then you're done. But then what happens after the next election? 2 years later, you can run again, correct?
If they're
4 years apart.
4 years.
Yeah, you can run again.
So it would be, yeah, so one election would occur, you would not be able to run. And then that election after that, you could run again for office. Or you could run immediately for a different office.
So if somebody termed out in 2024, they could not run again until 2028,
Correct.
unless they were running for, let's say, the office of mayor.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's fine because they do have to get elected, so if people don't like them, they can, not vote for them.
Yeah.
So,
I'm not gonna get stuck on this point, but 4-year terms, we've had a string of 2-year because of
Resignation.
resignations. Is 4-year intimidating for community members? If we're talking about a small community, we can't get people even get from a certain district to come in. Is 4 years just scary sounding? Like, if we change it to 2, would that be more fruitful for more candidates, or does that add too much complication to the elections?
I think the issue that I think we faced was 2 years. Would we potentially have to have everyone up for grabs at each 2-year election then?
Yeah, you'd be wiping your slate clean
Yeah.
every 2 years, so you wouldn't have those staggered terms. So if something happened, and let's say you couldn't hold your election, you would still have a council that could function, and make emergency decisions if something were to happen like that. So, yeah, it's better to have the staggered, and I think that's why it's 4. But I can't answer the question as to whether 4 seems really daunting for people, so maybe.
I think it's, I think some people don't know until they get into it. But I think the time goes by much quicker than you think. And it kind of baffles me that the House of Representatives is 2 years because you're constantly running for election. So it's, I think 4 is good because you stagger it. You're having an election every 2 years. I think having mayor elected for 4 years is good. So, and yeah, so I think the way we've got it is a pretty
just
good,
imagine the
pretty good system.
signs.
Yeah, signs.
How many signs you'd have to buy?
Oh, we've got goose signs.
No.
Yes.
The 5.
So,
Well, Jeff?
no, keep going. I was going to comment on one of the sections a little further down.
I was gonna, on section 5, I was going to recommend that we adjust the valid number of signatures. 50 signatures for mayor and 25 for council members seems fairly high.
What is it today?
Right now it's 10 for both, I believe.
Oh, you only have.
But we needed 25 to get on this commission.
You gotta get 25.
I don't
This is more
know. I don't
important.
think that
This is more
that's that high. I mean, 10 seems like you do that with your neighbors. You don't have to do any work
Yeah.
to get 10.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not bothered by 50. I mean, you gotta hustle. I mean, maybe spend 2 weekends at it. You know what I mean? Or, yeah.
I agree. I think it should be a little bit of a challenge, right?
Yeah, so cities are 25
Yeah.
under state law. So that's probably where that 25 is coming from a little bit, but yeah. I mean, and remember, Colorado municipalities, you can write in. So,
Do we need to strike that last part of 5
the
then
within
from
their
within their district?
yeah, so did you want 25 for all offices, 50 for all offices?
I'm good with 50 for mayor and 25 for
Yeah.
council.
Okay, so
Fine.
you want to keep that?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. And to mayor?
I'm not the mayor. I still kind of hear that term. I think it's good.
Yeah. Matt?
This is all the same as it is today, right? Nothing
Yeah.
different in here than there is today.
Nothing different.
Yeah.
Then
Everyone good?
Scratch all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay.
saves us a bit of time.
There you go. All right.
This is more. Yes, me too.
Okay. So this is the authority of trying to get all on one page, but I'm having trouble.
That's fine. I mean, this looks, if
Yeah.
I remember, this is all basically what it is today anyways, which is fine by me.
Mhm.
So I had one question on this one. I'm trying to remember. So it talks about solely and directly through the town manager. I thought, and again, it's been 20 years almost, but didn't the town attorney report directly to the board as well?
That's my recollection, yes.
Yeah, the town attorney doesn't handle administrative services. So they're probably down below, I'm guessing in the town attorney section, it says they serve at the pleasure of the town council or whatever, so.
Isn't the town attorney contracted?
I believe so.
So they would serve under the city manager at this point, or town manager at this point.
Yeah.
Well,
Think so.
I thought there had to be like a separation or something.
Yeah, because the
like
town
that.
attorney is a statutorily recognized office for statutory towns. So they serve at the pleasure of town council, yeah. But they do serve pursuant to a contract, but
Yeah, and we see in the later section, focused on the town attorney shall serve at the will of the town council.
okay, I wasn't sure which one of these, had that in. I wanted to my point is to maintain that the town attorney serves the town council, not the town manager.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's detailed, at least in this charter that we're referencing, that's detailed in the later section, in section 8.
Okay.
And I will say that I think the purpose of two, particularly that second sentence, is really to talk about, it's a limitation on town council, is to say everything's supposed to go through the manager. And we're seeing that second sentence quite often now in home rule charters. So you don't see that in the old ones, so.
Yeah, and I'm good with that.
Okay. We ready to move on to qualifications? Okay.
Is there anything different in this, other than registered elector of town of Elyria, that is anything different than this than is what is for a statutory town right now?
No.
Some of the other charters had, minimum age. This one does not, implying that it, if you're a registered elector, you're 18. And so thus 18 is the age, which I'm fine with.
I'm fine with that.
Should be.
I mean, I think choosing other ages, one of them, I think Monument or something was 22. I was like, where did you come up with that? I mean, did you throw a dart?
Exactly.
Must have had some
I
issue.
can tell you it was a very lengthy discussion between 22 and 23.
Oh, goodness.
It was a very lengthy discussion. So I did want to talk about two. And I briefly referenced this earlier, and this is not quite as broad as a felony prohibition. It's got specific felonies. There are some complications with this. You should be aware that the ACLU is making noise about challenging these types of provisions in home rule charters. They are in several. This is certainly no exception. But part of what has to happen is when someone shows that they're going to have to sign an affidavit making sure that they are qualified, and part of that affidavit is going to have to be this charter provision if you keep it. It's pretty tricky to do that. I mean, you take the person's word for it. We're not allowed to run background checks on people who are running for office, so the town can't do that, so we take their word for it. So they could be elected, and something could come up later, and there would be probably a big brouhaha over that person having to vacate the office. The other side of this argument that I've heard sitting through these home rule commission meetings is that, if someone has, served their time, they ought to be able to serve their community. And the fact that they did something in the past shouldn't dictate that. I think Erie probably, and I can ask in our office, the person who handled Erie's home rule, why they chose these, I can guess, because they're money related. So they're trying to narrow that ACLU challenge is to just be a felony prohibition. So it's just something to think about. But these are not uncommon.
Have you ever seen this where it was written that if they've been convicted of any of these in the last 25 years or last 10 years, then they wouldn't be eligible. But if it was before that, that kind of satisfies that, they've done their crime, they've done the time. Now they can do it if they're beyond that time frame.
I haven't, but I have. That's been part of the discussions that I've sat in on when home rule commissions are trying to make the choice about this provision. There have been discussions about a time limitation, but I've never seen one actually end up in a charter.
I actually made a note by this. I like this, and I think that it has to be in there because anybody that's embezzled public money shouldn't be serving on our board. So I think if you put that stipulation in there that if it was beyond 10 years ago, then that's fine. But I don't know. I think you have to have something in this, like this.
The only concern that I have with the current list and its makeup is it leaves open a lot of other different potential offenses that could have loopholes associated with them. I do agree. I think if you're embezzling public money, that you probably should not be on the board. I wonder if we could almost play around with the language of this accordingly. Because just the listing out of these specific offenses is kind of what is the sticking point for me, at least here, because I want to know kind of the rationale for these specific offenses. And I'm wondering if the main concern here is related to kind of abuse of government funds or things like that, if we could have the language a bit broader.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree with you, but because I didn't understand, I was going to ask, what is subordination of perjury? What does that mean?
It means either encouraging or assisting someone in perjury. So,
to me, it's strange to get so specific about these money issues. But what about assault or is that?
Sometimes we see.
Yeah, assault and harassment.
Well, that's where my concern is with listing it out.
Yeah, I don't think you could. Yeah, there's just all kind of weird things that someone could have done that.
I think maybe this list of specific things are things that they assumed would make you unfit specifically to serve as a government official.
Right.
Whereas assault, we don't want someone who assaults people, but maybe that's something that if they had done the time for that, that it wouldn't necessarily make you unfit for public service. I don't know.
Isn't to some extent at a purist level, right? Isn't that really? It really is for the voters to determine even if someone's embezzled money and they say they're reformed. Isn't that ultimately for the voters to decide whether that offense is one that they deem unacceptable and therefore will not vote for a person?
But the voters won't know about that because the candidate is signing an affidavit, and if they don't disclose that information, then voters don't have access to that information. So
but the same thing applies.
But this is all public record, right? You could go look up if you're the one running against is a felon.
So
I'm not saying that's a reason I want to change it, but it's it seems like this would come out in normal course of an election. If,
Yes.
but maybe you were running unopposed, right? Maybe there wasn't any competition, right? 3 slots and 3 candidates, right? Then maybe it wouldn't come out.
If the
I don't know.
town can't do the background check, can the other candidates or who could
Yeah,
do it? Anybody
individuals
else
can.
could?
Anybody can do it.
But
It's
who's
hard
doing that?
without
I mean,
fingerprints, to get it.
somebody moved to the,
But you can't
sorry.
from CBI. Go ahead, sorry.
if somebody moved to the town 2 years ago, doesn't really know anybody, nobody's gonna know, what their criminal record is. So I just think it's just a safeguard. I think it's a good thing to have in place. And maybe not all those offenses, but I think that we do have to have something in place.
2 comments I have on it is there seems to be like, if you've done this in the past, should that be revealed? And there's a stipulation, if you are convicted of one of these offenses during your term, your office shall be vacated. We should probably be having 2 separate conversations there. My second comment on this is to Clint and Dalton's point is this list is 6 or so offenses. What are we missing? What were the ones that we're not thinking of?
Yeah.
So there's, the phrase you'll hear sometimes is the crimes of moral turpitude. So anything that's kind of vice related, or these would fall probably in those as well. Some communities just say felony, so that's going to be felony assault, that kind of thing. It's going to include all that other stuff as well. So
But the ACLU is
they're making
challenging
noise.
to
They
drop.
haven't sued yet, but our clients have received letters. And that was about a year ago that we started seeing those letters. So
It wouldn't be as much of an issue if that person is actually convicted of that offense while they are on the town council, though. It's just a matter of thinking, like, if someone has done this in the past, maybe they've paid for their crimes already.
yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
whether they would attack the second part of that as
Yeah.
strongly as the first part. I mean, it's all qualifications, right? It's all focused on qualifications. So if for some reason you failed to be a resident of the town, your place would be
right.
vacated, right? So that's why they're linked like that. So
I mean, the broadness of this, I mean, there's a list of things like perjury, right? That dime bag wasn't mine, and all of a sudden, right? That's on your record forever, right? Is that what we're trying to throw people off?
Well,
To say you can't run because of that?
Well, the crime of perjury and being actually convicted of perjury means you lied under oath. That crime, and I will say the subordination of perjury, those are really, really rare crimes to, convictions that are even sought, much less, successful. So those you're not going to see very often. But if you lie on the stand and no charges are brought and you're not convicted, then you haven't been convicted of perjury and it's not going to disqualify you.
For those who want to broaden this list, what else do you have in mind?
I mean, for me, my position actually would be to potentially excise this. I think personally, if you have committed a crime and been convicted of it accordingly, you've served your time, I personally believe that you can be able to go back and be a good citizen, because who knows, there are countless potential backgrounds and histories of individuals. I personally work in the cannabis industry, and I work with a lot of individuals who have felony cannabis possessions and go on to have thriving and successful businesses. And I just get worried, I think also to Ryan's point, with listing it out. That's kind of where my main sticking point is, because what are we then potentially forgetting? I think it just opens up a can of worms here. I do think we can have safeguards if you're convicted of doing a felony charge, for instance, while in office. You can be vacated, but I think we can be in a position, hopefully, where if an offense occurred in the past, individuals can come forward and still do public service.
I'll add that these items that are enumerated are based on today's values, and the values 50 years from now could be very different. So getting back to this idea of simplicity and maximizing flexibility for future city councils or town councils, I would be supportive of removing specifics and maybe changing the language to be if you're convicted of a felony, but I agree with Dalton that if you've served your time, let's bring you back into society and have you productive members. So I don't think that should preclude somebody from running for elected office.
Well, it's interesting.
I got-
Eagle has none of this language, right? And then Severance has felony, right? So they're all over the map. So there's not a real, yeah. That's what I meant, monument.
See, my concern with just including felony, and I know this is probably just because of my work, it's like there are felony cannabis convictions. It's like you're an 18-year-old in the 1970s and you're arrested for felony cannabis possessions. Again, it's like the standing of that back then versus today has changed dramatically. And I think a lot of this information, I know there are concerns, an individual comes to Superior, brand new resident, have no idea who their background is. We have very educated population. I do think that information would come out in the course of an election if people were digging through opposition research between candidates or just residents in town themselves doing kind of their due diligence prior to the election.
And I do think if, theoretically, someone was elected and it came out later as they were serving that they had been convicted of one of these things or any type of felony, then it could be on the elected to decide if that bothered them so much that they want to start a recall or something, if it did or didn't. So there's still a way to get someone out of office. It's just not that you would automatically be not eligible anymore.
Yeah, I agree with Dalton and Mike's points that I think it seems like an odd collection of things to list out. And over time, those could become an issue. And I can think of a lot of other serious things that are not on this list that would be that's just a real head scratcher as well. So, yeah, I think, opposition research I've seen in this town is like a sport. So I think that's. I think we're probably protected in that regard.
So I'm not sure where we're landing up for agreement on this. So are people saying we shouldn't have this clause in at all? We should make it broader and be a felony? I guess where I'm looking at it is, if you were to leave a clause like this in at all, I would say that it is convicted of one of these, pick a crime or a felony pursuant to carrying out your duties of as an elected official, something along those lines, to say, hey, you've been in this and you've done embezzlement of public funds while being an elected official or employee or a public employee or something along those lines. So it's actually caveating it towards what you would be doing carrying out this job specifically. It doesn't pertain to other things outside of this that may be bad and we might not like it, but then that's up to the electorate to vote for if it's a qualification.
But as an elected official, you are engaging with the public in ways that you may not want somebody with a sex offense, engage, go into the elementary schools or something like that. It just, there's things that, as an elected official, you can be, it could be as very much as serious as some of these, embezzlement things. So I just think it's too much of I am in favor of striking this and making it just not having these items in here.
Not having any items or leaving it as a broad felony conviction?
No, and I think to Dalton's point, felony is also kind of one of those things that, yes, some felonies could be perceived as hugely serious, or the 18-year-old that got the felony for possession.
So you're saying strike? I'm sorry. You're saying strike the whole clause?
Correct.
I agree with you. Good. Violent agreement.
So if someone is serving on the town council and they are convicted of embezzling public money from the town of Superior, that would not automatically disqualify them from office.
No, you would be leaving it up to the electors to decide to recall them.
I think it's fair that they should be disqualified if they embezzle town funds as a council member.
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical choice a little bit, about how much you want to give the electors the right to make these choices about these people.
So there's one which is qualification, which is what this is. I think someone brought this up at the very beginning. Are we separating the qualification versus the termination, right?
I think,
Or
yeah,
am I-
but I think
am I mixing this up?
the problem with that is an office is declared vacant when it relates to a qualification because you failed to meet them. So you can't really split them. You're either qualified when you run and lose that qualification and the office becomes vacant. You know, like they're tied together. You can't say, well, you could have this if you run, but then if it happens while you're in office, now suddenly you're not qualified. Like I think you're going to really struggle to make that distinction.
Right. But is there a clause to? Well, okay, fair enough. So I think recall. I would rather get rid of it and let the recall mechanism come into play.
Can I offer, I heard this from Mike, which really resonated, and Clint, you brought this up, is the mayor goes and visits an elementary school and they have child sex offense. There's a safeguarding element to this as well, that maybe instead of disqualified or ineligible, there's simply if you have been convicted of a felony in the last 5 years, you must disclose that so that people don't have to go dig around for it and they can go find out what the
I don't
felony
know
is.
if legally are we allowed to force someone to disclose that information. Yeah.
That's a good question.
I don't know if legally.
I don't think you are.
Yeah, that would be, because I understand that point.
So it's
completely,
just
like,
an
if it's-
affidavit saying,
Yeah.
I didn't do these things.
And that's what this is asking, is it's asking people to self-disclose. Yeah, I've been convicted of embezzlement, therefore I can't run. So, I mean, we're asking, and we can't do a background check on them. So we're kind of asking them to self-select that they're qualified. And I think if somebody's, intent on not disclosing that, they're just not going to do it. And then, it'll probably might or might not bubble up later. But I think Erie's, language is probably related to some Erie, recent Erie experiences. And that's, what was driving that for them. And I think if we were looking at many of these other charters, we wouldn't even be reading this paragraph because we're using Erie as a guide. But I think this is kind of the point of let's broaden the net a little wider than just this one.
Any other initial kind of thoughts?
I think I'm agreeing with not to strike it, but I want to make, Chris was pretty strongly in favor. I want to see where his viewpoint is.
No, I'm a team player. So of course, I mean, if this group feels that it shouldn't be there at all, then I'm fine with that. I believe that we should have something in there because, or at least let us know if somebody's been convicted of something like this, of any of these. But if the group feels that we shouldn't have it in there, I'm fine with that.
I think, again, the hard thing that I grapple with is actually just like the legality of forcing that information out of someone who's potentially running for office. I don't know if the town, even home rule, would legally be in a position where they could force that information.
Wouldn't you have to do that if you're applying for certain jobs or for some jobs?
That's employment.
Yeah.
The rules are different. They're pretty distinctively different for employment as opposed to elected officials. So yeah, the most we can do is have them affirm whether or not they've been convicted of either these crimes or a felony. That's the most we can do. I mean, they already signed an affidavit, right, for the other stuff, and so it would just be added to that. But that's the most we can do. We don't take that information and double check it. We can't do that, so.
I mean, I think I've been convinced to take out the first part. I'm still a little stuck on the second part. If someone is actively serving and is convicted of one of these things or some other serious crime, if we took this all out, what that would mean is the person would continue serving unless a recall was initiated.
Yeah. So let's take the embezzlement of public money for an example. It's going to be pretty hard for one single council member or mayor to embezzle public funds because of the accounting restrictions on who signs checks, who observes everything. There's so many checks and balances that It's not to say it doesn't happen, it definitely does, but it's much harder for an elected official to do that. You'll see that more at the, staff level. Like Martin, since he's not here, I'll make fun of him.
He could do
So
it.
it's pretty hard for that to happen. And let's say it were to happen, then, council could take certain actions to restrict that person's access to, like, you're not going to be on the bank account, and that kind of thing. And council could do some stuff to kind of restrict that person's access to money. And then, like you said, the voters could choose
Yeah.
to. Maybe they like the embezzler.
Yeah, I think it'd be pretty hard to function with someone on your council who's been convicted of,
It would. Yeah.
That's, I
acting
almost,
against you.
my thinking is almost if a member of the council was discovered to have embezzled, personally just kind of anticipating and knowing Superior, I think a recall effort would go
Right
for
away.
before a conviction even occurs.
Probably, yeah.
I don't imagine that we would actually get to the point where a potential conviction could happen and they continue to serve.
I just
a year
hope we
and a
don't
half.
have a recall before due process happens for
Yeah.
someone, right? That would be.
Well, that's,
that would be a
that's
mistake.
like a
That could
debate
happen,
on.
yeah.
Could the
Could
council
happen.
have like a vote of no confidence of that individual and to Catherine's point, significantly scale back?
Yeah, and there's there's
Responsibilities and
censoring
duties.
and stuff like that, the account council. And I will say, like, for those of you familiar with the criminal justice system, it's not exactly quick. And so, if someone was, charged with that, let's say a mayor was charged with that, and they're going through the criminal process, I think the voters, if they want to recall them,
It would just recall them, yeah.
they don't have to wait for a conviction. They could do it anytime,
Okay.
right? And this does not
Under
restrict them.
investigation for
Yeah,
bribery or
yeah.
anything, yeah.
Even the
And then-
whiff of a, something.
So that
they could
recall could even be faster than
It-
going through this process.
potentially. Yeah.
Likely.
Yeah.
Likely.
Likely.
Just be as fast as you could get it on the ballot, right?
so-
Next ballot.
Yeah. Well, you can do it, yeah. So wouldn't some of this fall under the ethics piece when we get to that as
Yeah,
well?
and
in
that's,
terms of
there's a whole section on ethics, and I think we
Exactly.
can detail
That's
that.
my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The don't do crime section.
Don't do.
Yeah.
One other question that just came up. So if someone, let's say, in the event of an attempted recall, would there be a special election for that, or do they have to wait till the next election cycle?
Depends on the cycle that you're in. So if you're close to a regular election, it goes at the regular
Okay, so
election.
within
There's
a certain
rules
number of
regarding
days.
timing.
Okay.
But if a recall
Okay.
occurs kind of outside the general election.
Then it can
yep,
be a
special
special
election
election.
would be called. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and generally the only restriction on recalls besides, getting your signatures and all of that is the 6-month waiting period after someone's been
6-month
elected.
waiting period.
After someone's been elected,
Oh,
they
I
get a
see.
kind of grace period of 6 months.
Okay.
And the reason for that is so you're not constantly running
Yeah.
elections. Like, well, I don't like that so-and-so got elected, so I'm going to recall them, and you're running elections all the time. It's kind of to give that person a chance.
Okay,
So
worst case scenario, you'd have a convicted
if they
felon for 6
embezzled on the
months.
first day,
On the first
you'd have to
day.
wait
Okay.
6 months to recall them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it does seem, I know we've touched on this point for quite a bit of time, but it does kind of seem overall the consensus might be to just strike this.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Agreed.
This is all standard, right? It's just. Yeah.
Sometimes communities require resignation if you're going to run for another office. That's just a judgment call.
Resignation at the
Resignation.
time of basically submitting your
Yeah,
candidacy
some communities
signatures.
don't like
Yeah, I
this.
don't-
If,
I don't
so
know.
you'd have to resign to become a candidate to run for the next office?
Yeah, and if you lose, then you're,
I don't
No,
know.
I
It
think
causes-
the continuity,
it
you
causes
wouldn't have
that
a majority, and
vacancy.
like, that seems
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
causes
Yeah.
problems.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with resignation,
Yeah.
so I think,
If they get elected, then resign.
correct.
Yeah.
That's fine.
okay?
Hey,
I'm going to keep scrolling unless you stop me.
let's read.
So, I mean, this is going to be one that's going to be the debate of. I'm sorry. I'll let you go down further. So the question I had was the automatic filling with the last person who ran. If you can go to that clause, unless people are still reading this part.
No, that's, yeah. First two are fine.
So subsection 4, this May 1st, that, to me, that means 8 months. You know, that's 8 months that you're waiting to fill a slot. And I just think that's too long. So I
agree with
think,
that.
I think that should be tightened up a little bit. I don't know what the magic number is, but I know we dealt with this at once or more during my 8 years, and it was kind of unclear as to whether we were kind of within that range, but it was, there was some debate about do we or don't we, and but I remember there being some pretty weighty issues that were being discussed at the time, and we wanted a full board, or we didn't want those, you know,
Split votes.
right, yeah.
Yeah,
And if
you're
you're
the tiebreaker.
yeah, if you're down one, you've got an even number, and then that's not great.
Would 30 days within the position becoming vacant, is that too?
That's too too short.
Too short.
I'm thinking more in the 4-month range. Would
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, 3 or 4 months, right?
3 or 4 months would be.
Yeah, so if you're running November elections, you'll start circulating petitions, I think, at the beginning of August.
Right.
So you'll already have people who are, you're starting that election process, so.
Yes. So what's your,
Yeah,
Catherine, what's your
is there any-
recommendation on this?
So, I don't know that so a lot, this is very specific. This is
Yeah.
and I was just looking at Eagles to kind of compare, and theirs is much more standard and vague. And a lot of, I don't know, I've just seen a lot of vacancies occur, and I think allowing the governing body the flexibility to make appointments as soon as they need to, when they need to, even if there's an election coming, because like you said, maybe there's something big going on and you want a full council.
But on the flip side of that, though, there was concern about, well, we appoint somebody 2 months before the election, we're kind of putting our thumb on the scale of that person to be elected in that next cycle. So there's this kind of this fine line between, yeah, we want to fill the seat, but we also don't want to kind of presume that that's the person that should be getting elected. Now,
Yeah, and I suspect, that's where this is coming from, right? So, I mean, I guess what I was making my point about the August is that, within that window where you have people actually petitioning and nominating for office, maybe you don't want to put your thumb.
Maybe
Yeah.
change May 1st to August 1st.
Yeah, or 90, it's usually 90 days before the election. That's when I'm pretty sure that's when they start circulating petitions, maybe 91. So, maybe that's a better time frame. And if you're in that time frame, then you don't have the people out there. Yeah, I don't know.
What does the Eagle one say?
It just says you appoint by state statute.
Oh.
And so that statute allows the power to the board to fill any vacancy or other elected office by appointment or by election. And if they don't do it within 60 days after the vacancy occurs, they have to order an election. So that's your current. So they have 60 days to appoint, and if they don't act, they have to order an election. Or they can order an election right off the bat.
To be honest, in the time when I was on the board and what I've seen, I don't think we've had any real issues with the appointments per se. So I guess I would raise the question: what's wrong with doing exactly that? Just following state statute, which is the way we've been doing it. Why do we need something different?
Yeah, because Erie gets pretty specific down below on how the procedure you need to go through here. This seems
I'm almost.
pretty overwhelming.
So you can tell there's been some traumatic events. in Erie.
Yeah.
including that, but I do agree kind of with Clint's point, because you do want to have a little bit of safeguards in place as well. And you want to be able to have the flexibility there while not kind of putting your thumb on the electorate. So I'm wondering if we can incorporate the Eagle statute with maybe saying this has to be done a certain amount of time prior to the election. Like you can't appoint someone
Maybe outside of
before the election.
Yeah, just wait.
like outside of that 90-day window.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
In the Eagle one, I saw it, I think it's
Is it-
in 3.02.
Oh, did I miss it? Okay. So insignificant, I missed it, so it's right there.
Yeah. And then just have like that, add a little caveat,
Okay.
and then we can,
So that's for council members. I'm just gonna put it in the, make a note, add Eagles. And did everybody see what Eagle had? Do you want me to put that up there?
Just the one sentence.
yeah. And then just maybe adding like the time frame prior to the election.
Yeah.
By resolution,
what's-
teachers fulfilling such vacancy. Okay.
And then I guess the only other question I have on this specific point is, this is specifically addressed to council members. Do we want it to be applicable also to the mayor?
Well, the mayor has a
Yeah.
separate section above.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds here. Just
Oh,
really
I
quick.
see. Like just by statute rather
Yeah.
than calling out the mayor.
I think, okay, I don't know. We'll let her finish typing because I thought the mayor pro tem did replace the mayor and then you fill the vacancy on the board. Isn't that how it happened? I think that's how it happens now, right?
Sorry. If I don't do it, I'll go home and I'll be like,
Yep.
I don't know what they said.
Nope, gotta do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. So what's the current process for the mayor? Isn't it that the mayor pro tem takes over and then you fill the council or the board seat in the same way as?
We don't go back out to elect a new mayor.
Yeah.
There is some language here, about the ward for the vacancy of the mayor in B.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Go over the state statute provisions again for declaring a vacancy or filling a vacancy.
Okay. So the Board of Trustees can appoint for any vacancy on the board. And that person, we talked about this earlier, holds until the next regular election. They also have the power to fill a vacancy by ordering an election. And even if that happens, that person elected only serves until the next regular election. They have to appoint, if they're going to appoint, they have to do it within 60 days, or they have to order an election. So they've got a 60-day window to kind of make a choice.
Okay.
If they don't do anything within those 60 days, they're required to order the election. And the same
Okay.
rules apply about how long the person sits. So,
Now that seems to make sense. It seems like I recall us taking longer than 60 days one time. And there was some debate about it, and I was thinking, why is there even debate about this? But anyway, okay. No, I think this is a good solution.
let's see.
The state statute is the
Yeah,
approach.
I think so, yeah. And I like but not within 90 days, because then you're, just let the
Yeah.
voters decide.
Yeah.
So continue on from here.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh,
My screen just got a lot smaller, so bear with me.
I believe we
we're
can
gonna
then
skip,
excise all of
I'll
that.
take that all out,
Okay.
or fix it.
So my only comment here is I felt it was weird to mention pro tem in the vacancies before defining pro tem. So I recommend moving this up one before the vacancies.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's
Right,
kind
we
of
talk about a position that hasn't been really discussed yet.
Okay.
But how is the information, the content otherwise?
Oh, yeah, I have to look. I just,
You didn't read that.
But I agree that ordering makes sense.
what is,
sorry.
how does is the term absent important here? Like, what defines absent? Like, you miss a meeting or you're, I mean, it's just that's it, right? You're out,
You're not there. Yeah.
not there, or, but like if you're, in a coma, I guess, I mean, not that we need to
You're also
define that,
absent,
but
probably.
that's all just defined as you're not available to
Yeah, I
be
mean,
at whatever event you need to do.
Yeah, if someone suffered a disability, like they're in a coma, depending on the outcome of that, that's going to fall into the disability section. that they're
Okay.
coming out.
But even if just like at a regular meeting, the mayor and the mayor pro tem for some reason aren't there, before proceeding, the council has to decide who's going to be the acting mayor for that meeting.
Yeah, you need a presiding officer.
Okay.
We did that one time.
It does happen.
It does happen.
If you have a good mayor and a mayor pro tem, they organize themselves,
or
but
acting
sometimes.
mayor.
Okay.
This is actually, I believe, the last section.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Article
So-
3, I can see it down there.
Just adjust that to our current
Yeah,
compensation
so-
level.
Okay, so,
I don't think we should have specific compensation dollar amounts in
Yeah.
here. I think we should acknowledge that if we want to provide compensation, we leave it at that, and then the town council, future town councils can figure out how much they get compensated.
How does that work though? Because they can't increase or decrease their own
They
compensation.
can, but
Oh, they
it takes
can.
effect the next,
I
doesn't-
see.
yeah.
It's just
So
for
this-
the
It
net.
doesn't take effect till the next election.
Yeah.
This one gets voted. So I was wondering whether, I know it's not binding and doesn't mean anything in terms of specific numbers, but somehow can you put in the town council and mayor shall receive a nominal compensation, some word in there that prevents it from becoming huge. And I know nominal is not defined in any real way and it can be contested, but it also limits it from becoming outrageous, if you will. I think that's probably why Erie put in actual numbers.
Yeah.
you can do that for sure. I will tell you that sometimes those very small words create a lot of heartache.
Yeah.
Probably true too.
I would almost,
As the council shall ordinance prescribe is what Eagle says
Yeah.
for their compensation. Sorry. Yeah, Eagle says by ordinance.
that's what I was going to
That
say,
makes more
just have it,
sense.
a simple.
Is it,
Yeah.
are we looking at the Erie one right there? 'Cause I
That's
don't
the
see that
Erie.
in
That's-
mine.
This is an Eagle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Erie's on this screen. They're reading Eagles
Yeah.
compensation.
That's
There's
3.07.
Eagles.
Yeah.
I've got the Erie.
Eagles is really simple. It just says you get compensation, and it's done by statute or by ordinance.
I have it right here.
Yeah, I agree. Like those amounts seem weird, right? Situations could change
Which
where
version?
those amounts need to
there
be
were actually
adjusted
two.
by more than inflation or removed, right?
Because
That's
one
just,
was adopted and one.
Yeah, they can remove their compensation as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe this is a first-time problem. Is there an ordinance currently, if there's continuation from
I got it off their website.
the current ordinances in Superior to define the compensation? So, okay.
Yes.
And
What are you guys getting paid? I don't even know anymore. It was $200 when I was on the board.
And I'll just say the version of the Erie charter that I'm reading does not have any dollar amounts. It just
Yeah,
says
that's what I'm
compensation,
saying. I
mayor and
don't
city
see that
council. Mayor and council members
Oh,
shall
so maybe
receive
they
compensation as the town council shall by ordinance prescribe. Town council shall neither increase nor decrease the compensation of the mayor or council during their term of office.
yeah, the link we have is a
And then the three.
proposed, the one I'm reading is a proposed charter, so they must have changed it.
Okay.
Yeah, I downloaded, this is downloaded from their Muni code. Yeah.
Oh.
It was a two-part question. Do you want to adopt the charter? And then
the second part was separate. Do you want to add this part in?
Oh, in Erie, they split the, jeez.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So,
That's the confusion.
Yes to both, I guess.
oh, that's interesting. So is the consensus to go with Eagles language?
I'd be more, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we did anything about CPI or any other stuff trying to define something. Just
That makes sense why that's in there then, because the voters approved that CPI. Because I was like, oh, wow, I don't know about that. But- Okay,
that's yeah.
all right, so that's 1 and 2 done. So you've had your first experience. So,
Ethics.
Isn't three just the code of ethics? We can
Yeah,
do that with
three's
two.
just one paragraph.
well, let's talk about that. Because, so if we decide to reorganize as Eagles is organized, then you've missed Article 2 which is elections. So you would do that. So we'd be a little jumbled there. And then you would move into town administration, boards and commissions, and ordinances at your next meeting. That's what that would look like. So you'd have Erie's language with Eagle structure.
Let's do that.
Okay. All right.
So
So
which ones were
elections.
those again?
Okay, so we would do elections. So we'd actually bounce back to Article 2.
Okay.
And then we would do town administration, appointed officials, or Erie's equivalent of this, boards and commissions, and ordinances.
And then what's the bonus fourth one if we're so speedy, which I doubt we will be, but
That is 4.
Yeah.
oh, is that four?
Administration, boards, and
I can, why don't I put municipal court in there? That's an easy knockoff one.
Okay.
So, okay, we'll actually put those 5 on there.
Okay.
And I'll do my
Can I ask
best to coordinate, they may not match up perfectly, so I'll do my best to coordinate that, yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can I ask just a sounding board for people where the people are at? So someone mentioned ethics is easy because all it says is you're going to have a code of ethics.
well,
Is there a feeling on this commission that there should be more in here outlining some timeless, things related to ethics, or do most people just want to have it just generic that the town will create an ethics thing later on?
I wouldn't mind fleshing it out a little bit more. Like I said, there's more to this in our municipal code already.
Yeah.
And we can, when we get to that, I don't know if Eagles has an ethics.
I think it was buried in
They do.
another section.
It's also pretty, yeah.
They've got a good one.
They have a code of conduct and
I'm
ethics.
somewhere between Eagle and
There it is.
Oh,
significantly
right there
less
in
than
the town
Louisville.
council section.
Yeah.
This is gonna be challenging. Yeah, it looks like it's the same language, so. We can provide as a supplement the code language that's in Superior's code right now.
I think that'd be good.
Investigate that.
Okay.
And then we can.
Okay. So
Yeah, so I think that'd be good if we can review the specific.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that'd be good if we had the supplemental material, what Superior has on record right now for ethics. See if there's anything we might want to incorporate or flesh out in this specific section. And we can potentially cover that at the next meeting too. So we have a lot on our plate for the next one.
Dalton. So can I repeat then for homework?
Oh, yeah,
That's why I wanted to make sure.
yeah.
So elections, town administration, boards and commissions, ordinances, municipal courts, and ethics then? Is that what I'm hearing or no? Or is it within all these?
Okay, let me just,
Yeah.
let me give me a second here and let me look at this, because this is their town council stuff.
does code of conduct fall?
Yeah,
under
I just
that,
need to kind of compare, because, see, their town council section, so they've got some of their stuff, but they also have meetings, and the code of conduct and voting, things that Erie doesn't have in their town council section. So in
You can let us know.
reorganizing, okay, let's do this. Let's do elections and then revisit Article 3, we'll revisit the subsection, or we won't revisit, but we'll visit for the first time the subsections that were not in Erie's.
Okay.
And what I will do when I reorganize it, I will identify those subsections. I'll basically lay out what the agenda is going to be for you all.
Perfect.
If that's easier than trying to do it right here. And then,
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
Just want to be able to do our
oath of
homework.
office
Yeah, that's
and
why I
that
call it
kind of
homework.
Yes.
stuff. Okay, because we could
And
spend
just-
another hour doing that, so.
Okay. And so for clarity, it sounds like everyone's in general agreement that we want to at least look at the code of conduct and ethics a little more than just saying the town will have a code of conduct and ethics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and, yeah, we'll basically try to get through Eagle's first 7 articles, and we'll touch on the things we haven't touched on. And of course, we'll go over Article 1 and 2, maybe, I don't know how they're gonna fall into the reorganization, so we'll just put that on. On the ethics stuff, how familiar are you all with the constitutional provisions on ethics? Shaking your head no? Would you like a little background on that? Okay. Because
Please.
I'm sure that
Please.
Superior's Code of Ethics stems from that, so, okay, I can do that. All right.
All right. Any other additional questions or comments?
One last comment. I don't remember if this specific language is in Erie or not, but a number of the charters use the term citizen outside of representing a citizen of the United States, and I'm wondering if we could modify that language to be a resident or something else that is more indicative of the folks that live in our community. Community member, because to me, citizen is we're a citizen of the United States. We're a resident of Town of Superior.
Good point. Good point.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll kind of keep my eye out for that.
Where are you seeing that referenced? I'm sorry.
It's been, I'm not sure if it's in the Erie Charter, but there are a number of charters that I have reviewed where it specifically talks about a citizen shall be able to do this,
Gotcha.
outside of the context of a citizen of the United States.
I searched Erie's. The only citizen hit was that one in the citizen of the United States.
Yeah, and it talks about, like in the preamble, it talks about residents.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually neither word's really used, except,
Something to keep in mind.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. Well, if that kind of sums everything up, we might be able to adjourn a little bit early.
Early.
Relatively. I was of the frame of mind this would end at probably around 9, given the topics at hand. So anything before that, I call a win. All of those who would like to make a motion to adjourn,
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
first and second, and we are adjourned.
There's no vote.
Oh, no vote. Whoops.
All those in favor?
All those in favor of adjourn.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.